In the movie Challengers, there's a scene where the camera becomes a POV shot of a tennis ball. To get the effect of the camera being the ball, it looks like most of the work was done in post, where they sped up the footage and added in camera shake and motion blur. To film this effect, they put the camera on a 30-foot techno crane and moved the camera back and forth over the net, which took them about 5 hours to shoot. I wanted to figure out a way to recreate this effect myself, and I decided to use an Insta 360 camera on a very long pole and a drone. There are 3 parts to this effect, and I used Adobe Premiere Pro and After Effects to create it. The first part is when the camera transitions into the POV of the ball. The second part is where I used the Insta 360 camera on the pole, and this was the main part of the effect. And the third part I'm going to show is how I transitioned from the 360 camera into a drone shot. For the first part of the effect, I filmed one of the tennis players overhead with a drone. I had them act like they were throwing a tennis ball up into the air and serving it. I filmed this in 60 frames per second so that it would be in slow motion. Then, in the same location, I used the drone again and filmed a tennis ball rotating in front of a blue screen. I drilled a hole into the ball and attached it to a drill bit so that I could use a drill to slowly rotate the ball at a constant speed. I clamped the drill to a tripod so that the ball would stay in the same place while filming this. I made sure to film the shot of the tennis player and of the ball from the same angle so that the lighting matched for both shots. To edit this part of the effect, I used After Effects. Inside of After Effects, I layered the shot of the tennis ball on top of the shot of the tennis player. Then I used the key light effect to key out the blue screen from the shot with the tennis ball, and I also created a mask around the ball to get rid of the drill and the drill bit. I turned the ball into a 3D layer and keyframed the position so that the ball moves from his hand up towards the camera. I made sure to adjust the position of the ball until it was large enough to fill the entire frame. I had the ball moving up towards the camera for about 29 frames, and I felt like this was a good speed for it to look like it was moving in slow motion. I then keyframed the Z rotation of the ball as it was moving towards the camera to add some extra rotation to it. I also made sure to turn on motion blur for the tennis ball layer. Then the last thing I did for this part was create a shadow for the ball. So I duplicated this layer and renamed the top layer Shadow. Then I added the drop shadow effect to this layer, checked the shadow only box, and then left all of the other settings the same. Then I reset the position on this shadow layer and adjusted this so that it was the proper size of a tennis ball compared to the size of his shadow. Then I created new position keyframes so that the shadow moved away from his hand over the course of about 13 frames. And that's how I created the transition part of the effect where the ball is moving towards the camera. For the main part of the effect, like I said earlier, I used an Insta 360 camera and attached it to a very long pole. For the settings on the camera, I filmed in the dual lens 360 mode. While filming, I moved along the outside of the court and walked back and forth between both of the players. I told them to move at about 25% speed when swinging the rackets and to make sure that they followed through with their swings. I brought the camera right up to their rackets just like if it were the ball, and they acted like they were hitting it away. I made sure to walk at a constant steady pace so that the footage was as smooth as possible. I also made sure to bring the camera down towards the ground and then back up like if it were a ball that was bouncing right before each hit. For editing, I used Premiere Pro to adjust the speed and framing of the footage. To be able to adjust the framing of the 360 footage, I downloaded the Insta 360 Reframe plugin for Premiere. It's a free plugin that Insta 360 has on their website. So with my footage in Premiere, the first thing I did was come into the motion tab and increase the scale to 140 so that the field of view wasn't so wide. Then I added the Insta 360 Reframe plugin to my footage. Inside of this effect, I changed the resolution to 4K 16:9, projection to no distortion, and set the preset to de-warp. Then I keyframed the pan, tilt, and roll, and went through my footage and adjusted the camera to spin or face in the direction I wanted it to with each bounce and hit. You can get as creative as you want with this since you have complete control over how you frame the camera. I also wanted most of these keyframes to have smoother movement when they start and stop, so to do that I selected the keyframes, right-clicked, then turned them into Bezier keyframes. After going through and setting all of my keyframes, I made sure to come down to the Advanced Settings tab in the Reframe effect and checked the motion blur box and increased the strength to 100. That way when the camera is moving around as the ball, it has realistic motion blur to it. After that, I adjusted the speed of the footage. So to do that, I right-clicked on the layer and then nested it into a new sequence. Then I opened up the time remapping speed option on that nested sequence. Now I was able to go through and adjust the speed of the clip to how I wanted it. I went through and created a point on the time remapping line at each time the ball was hit. After I had all of my points, I was able to grab the time remapping line and drag it up. The higher you drag this line, the more you'll speed up your footage. The reason I created multiple points on this line was so that I could have more control over each hit of the ball and could speed up each part to how I wanted it. After that, I needed to add some camera shake for when the ball is bouncing and being hit. An easy way to do this was to create a new adjustment layer and add it on top of the nested sequence. Then I added the transform effect to this adjustment layer. First thing I did with this effect was adjust the scale to 120 so that I had the room I needed to adjust the position. At the beginning of my footage, when the ball is hit for the first time, I created a position keyframe inside of this transform effect, then went forward 1 frame and adjusted the position to move left, right, up, or down. I created 4 keyframes like this and would just randomly move the position around so that it looked like the camera was shaking for those frames. Then I went forward another 3 frames and created one last keyframe where I reset the position back to where it started by hitting the reset arrow. Then I came down and increased the shutter angle to about 145 so that when the camera shakes, there's some motion blur to it. Then I was able to duplicate this adjustment layer and add it to each point when the ball bounced or was being hit. And that was it for the main part of the effect. The last thing I did was transition from the 360 camera into this drone shot where I ended on a wide view of the tennis court. So to film this, I planned out where the 360 camera would be on the court for this transition. I knew I was going to edit this in a way where the 360 camera was looking down at the court so that it was easier to hide the transition. After filming this part with the Insta 360 camera, I got the drone shot next. I flew the drone over the same path with the camera pointed down at the court. I flew the drone sideways for a bit and then stopped once the net was in the middle of the frame and then quickly flew straight up until the entire court was in the shot. Then in Premiere, I mainly used a fade transition to go from the 360 camera to the drone, and I actually think it's pretty seamless. I also created keyframes for the scale on the drone shot so that it starts out closer to the court, which helps hide the transition even more. Then I decreased the scale as the drone was rising to reveal more of the court. I also keyframed this shot to rotate a bit as the drone was going up. And then that's it. That's how I created a POV tennis ball effect.